Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. A good topic for you today? Let's do it. Night watchmen of Reddit share their creepiest stories while on shift. Please remember to like, share, comment, hype, listen and ask for shoutouts, and subscribe. I was a night shift security guard at a hospital when I was 20. This was a relatively nice suburban hospital with no trauma unit, so there wasn't a lot going on at night. We made rounds and occasionally helped to strap angry people down in the ER. Mostly we checked people into the morgue. There was a logbook that had to be signed by the guard and the nurse, and paperwork that had to be filed for every corpse that came downstairs. The morgue was really small, a freezer that had room for maybe 2 gurneys and 1 table for bodies in the main room. Around the table were all kind of plastic containers with biohazard labels. Most had parts that I could identify. One was full of eyeballs, seriously. I have no idea what they were for. One night, I got a call over the radio that a body was headed downstairs. I went to meet the nurse and saw she was carrying a small blanket, stillborn. We went into the morgue, and she laid the bundle down on the table, unwrapping the blanket and revealing a tiny, discolored baby. She checked the tag on it and realized that she had forgotten the paperwork. Corpses are unnerving in their stillness. Bodies move, breathe, flows, and muscles twitch, but not the dead, not this baby. I stood there with it for a good 10 minutes, my eyes locked on it, waiting for the nurse to return with the papers. Part of the anxiety was the inevitable horror movie playing in my head, where the baby opens its eyes and looks at me. But part of it was just the uncomfortable confrontation with death I was having. I worked in an abandoned hospital for a while, and it was full of it seemed every damn night. Everything had logical explanations, but working in there alone at night was a trip. First, the doors in the stairwells had gas piston hinges that wouldn't really close the door and slowly leak out. You get to the other end of the hallway and the stairwell door would slam loudly as if someone slammed the door closed. It took me a week to figure out the pattern of which door did it. The elevators were somehow rigged together so you would go from one floor to the next. And when the door opened, the elevator across the hall or next to you would be closing like you just missed someone getting in. This shit was totally random. I once turned on the PA system with a radio next to it so I could have music throughout the building. I thought I was clever, till it turned itself off when I was in another part of the building. Had an auto timeout switch. I once walked to the emergency room, and there was this bloody dude holding his arm just outside the door, staring at me. I froze and we just stared at each other for what seemed like an eternity, plus a few hours. And then he told me to let him in because he broke his arm. I tell him this is an abandoned hospital, and he just walks out into the darkness without saying another word. Once I was doing floors at night at this pipeline fitting company in the middle of the boonies and looked up, and there was the Hills Have Eyes looking dude on crutches banging on the door. He tells me to open the door and he needs a ride because his van had broken down. The guy had his right leg all bandaged up, so I was pretty sure he was lying. Told him no thank you, and he just laughed and hobbled into the night. That job was bad for my nerves. My cousin's friend, whom we can call Ian, worked at the general hospital in the city where I live. He worked there during the operation, and after a few months later, the hospital closed. Currently abandoned, the hospital is supposed to be renovated into apartments, but it hasn't happened yet. Ian still patrolled the hospital with another guard at night after it closed. He told me a few stories about how he heard a female moaning, female talking, the sound of someone sneezing, and more. I had been in the hospital during that time of it being open. I kind of wonder what it would be like when abandoned. I asked Ian what his scariest experience was at the hospital. One night, he and the other guard went up to the top floor of the hospital, and they heard a bunch of noises on the bottom floor, like someone broke in and was throwing shit around. When they got down the stairs and closer to the sounds, it sounded more like someone punching both their fists on the wall. Once they reached the first floor and opened the door to the stairs, the noises stopped. But they only stopped on that floor. The banging began again on the top floor. Rushing up the stairs again, the two of them heard silence on the top floors, and the banging sounds began once again on the bottom floor. This happened for about 20 minutes, till it was quiet again. I used to work at City Hall a few years ago as a security guard. There were abandoned jail cells in the basement that hadn't been used in years. Part of my duties was to patrol them for any squatters. It was probably my second time patrolling alone, and things started to get really fucking weird. I went down to the old prison or holding cells, and it's a long, narrow hallway, about 6 meters wide and 100 meters long, with cells on both sides. The hallway was lit with light bulbs hanging from the ceiling. I was walking past the fourth column of cells when the lights went out. I turned my flashlight on and walked back toward the light switch. Right when I was about to turn them back on, the lights flickered on again. I thought to myself, I'm getting out of here. I started walking fast past the cells while quickly checking them. I was about halfway when the lights went off again. I heard 2 cells slam. I ran with my flashlight on straight toward the other end of the hallway. I reached the end and ran up to my workstation. I then called my supervisor and asked him if there were any electrical issues that had been reported. He said no. I had 2 hours left on my shift and couldn't leave. I was at my workstation paranoid and shitting my pants. I used to work for a relatively small security company. It was privately owned and had about 30 employees altogether. They'd get a contract with a factory, and then basically your job was to sit in that factory for 8 to 12 hours when no one was working in it. So I'd be working by myself, alone, overnight, in a completely empty factory. In my 2 years of doing that job, I never once saw a single thing I would call supernatural. However, I did see Dennis. One night, my captain calls me on my phone and tells me a new trainee will be coming in about 5 a.m. and to show him the ropes, teach him how to make rounds. You walk around the building, that's basically what making a round is, etc. So it's about 4:45 a.m., and I step outside to the parking lot to have a smoke and wait on the new guy. After about 10 minutes, a car pulls up, stops, backs up, and drives away. I was clearly visible, so I have no idea why he left, but the car passed by about 3 or 4 more times before finally pulling in and shutting off the engine. I can see him in the car, and he's just sitting in the driver's seat staring at me. In the back seat are 2 kids, probably around 6 to 8. After about 3 minutes of me wondering what the fuck is going on, he gets out of the car. Dennis is f***ed up looking. He's about 4'10" and fatter than damn near anyone I've ever seen. He has a huge rash, covering about 70% of his body, with a white crust outlining most of it. He then speaks, had a little trouble finding the place. His voice is high-pitched. I mean, really high-pitched. I'm talking about Judge Doom in the final scene of Who Framed Roger Rabbit high-pitched. Then he extends his hand to shake mine. Without thinking much, I shake it. There's only 1 finger on it. 1. And the rest of the hand looks like some kind of stumpy flesh mitten. One of the kids gets out of the car, has the same rash, is also very fat, and is also missing fingers. He says, "Daddy, can I get a drink?" Dennis turns around and screams in that high-pitched voice, "Get back in that damn car, don't you come out here again." I'm in fucking shock. So I take the guy around the factory and show him the perimeter and tell him where the emergency stuff is. About a minute into our walk, I notice this guy smells like hell. I mean, he literally reeks of ball sweat and fresh diarrhea. Ugh. The whole time he's asking me strange questions like, "Do you have a crush on anyone that works here?" Or, "Can I hunt on this property?" He finally leaves after standing in the office trying to make small talk with me for about 15 minutes after the tour. On his way out, he said, "We're going to be good friends, even if you don't think so right now." I went home about 2 hours later and stood in the shower for a good solid hour, washing myself, trying to get the image of that guy out of my head. Called my captain and asked him to reassign me someplace new. Never had to see him again. That's been more than 10 years, and it still bothers me. Hey guys, I hope everybody's having a great start to your week. Never a pretty good one. Got off my day job a little early today, made it home, beat traffic, cleaned out the whole garage, which will make the missus very happy. And I don't know. Trying to set the week up for success early. So hope you guys have a great night, and we will see you tomorrow. I used to be a doorman/concierge at a condo in Midtown Manhattan. One night at 2 a.m., I got a call on my desk phone. A man was telling me that someone in my building was posing nude in front of his window with the light on, and that he was doing all kinds of sexual things to himself. He expressed concern for his daughter. Her bedroom could see everything. I asked him what floor it was on and such, and I also told him that there isn't much I could do about it since people can do what they want on their property, and that I recommend he close the blinds and such. I then realized that the apartment he described was supposed to be vacant. I then started getting pretty damn nervous. I was 19 at the time, and I thought of all the horrible possible scenarios that could happen. I thought some stranger snuck into the building and started squatting in an empty condo. I grabbed my pocket knife, and instead of taking the elevator, I took the emergency staircase 3 stories up to the floor of the apartment to avoid alerting anyone of my presence. I finally get up to the 3rd floor, and I notice the elevator is still at the lobby floor where I left it. I then slowly start to approach the supposed vacant apartment door. I slowly turn the doorknob to see if it was open. It was locked, and I slowly inserted the key, trying to make as little noise as possible. I open the door and see all the lights are off, except for a light coming from the room the man described seeing a naked man in. My heart started pounding. I had to convince myself that I lived in a physical universe, and that it would not be possible for that naked man to know of my presence. I was incredibly quiet. I took off my shoes before entering the hardwood floor apartment in my socks. Holding nothing but shoes and a small pocket knife, I start to approach the bedroom where the door is closed, but the light was clearly on. As I slowly walk toward the door, I notice that the floor is wet, as if they had exited the shower. Someone was definitely here. I set down my shoes and draw my knife. My heart is pounding so hard I feel it in my throat. I did my best to remain calm and convinced myself there was no way for that person to know of my presence. Slowly approaching the door, I stay as quiet as I possibly can to see if I can hear anything coming from the other side of the door. I stood there for about 5 minutes in the dark, and I heard nothing. I gently placed my hand on the bedroom door, debating whether to try and open the door slowly, or to go in fast before the perv knows someone is about to enter. I made my decision, and I burst into the room. I see nothing. I quickly look around the room. I quickly look in the closet, and then under the bed. Nothing. The room was furnished because it was used as a showroom for open houses for potential customers. I find nothing, except a pile of what appeared to be semen on the window and floor. I was so confused I also started to freak out because someone was here, and now they're not. Where could they be? I put my shoes back on, then turned on all the lights in the apartment and did a full sweep. I found nothing. I began to exit the apartment and call the elevator to head back to the lobby. The elevator doors open, and to my shock, I see moist footprints on the marble floor of the elevator. I didn't know what to think. I knew I had to get back to my security camera system. I rushed back to the lobby and backtracked all the cameras in the lobby or outside for the last 45 minutes. Then I saw it. Not 2 minutes after I entered the emergency staircase, the elevator doors opened and a man in a ghost giant trench coat and fedora exited the elevator and walked outside from the lobby entrance seemingly barefoot. To this day, I have no idea who that was, and I sure as hell had a hard time explaining this to my board of directors. Good thing I had the security footage of the mysterious pervert, else I'd have no way of explaining the large sums of jizz all over the bedroom windows of the showroom condo. The next day, I went and purchased a larger pocket knife. My dad used to be one for a security company in a small town that regularly patrolled abandoned buildings. He usually worked from 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. One day he wasn't feeling so well, so he called in sick. One of his colleagues covered his shift and was checking out an old hotel to make sure no squatters were in the place. My dad's colleague checks a few of the rooms, then checks another. He goes to one room and the door handle is open, so he goes into the room to check it out. Everything in the main room seems okay, so he goes into the washroom, and a man jumps out of the shower and stabs my dad's colleague and ran away. A few hours go by and dispatch hear nothing, so they go to the hotel to find him bleeding out on the floor. Luckily, they rush him to the hospital and he survived. It's scary to think that this could have happened to my father. My dad feels somewhat responsible for what happened that night, as he thinks it should have happened to him, not his colleague. Shortly after that, my dad quit the job and moved on to something else. My family owned a pizza place while I was in high school. It was a small town in New York where at night the state police take over because keeping the local PD around wasn't cost effective. Anyway, I was closing the pizza place that night, which included making sure the employees cleaned, took out the trash, and prepped for the next day. We recently fired a really sketchy dude who we didn't trust at all. I emptied the register and probably had about $1,200 in cash in the bag. We would always take the cash to the Bank of America across the street. Keep in mind this BOA has been robbed many times because of the terrible location and lack of local PD. I was walking out to my car in a dark, empty parking lot. The shop was in a small strip mall. Someone from the shadows said, "Need some help with that bag?" Without a doubt, the scariest night of my life. I kept a shotgun in my car, but it wouldn't have done much good in that situation. Now that I'm old enough, this is the reason I support openly carrying a weapon. I used to work overnight security at a pharmaceutical company. I was the only one on duty and always the only one in the building from midnight until about 6 a.m. In the lobby were two decorative metal grand staircases with big wooden doors at the top of them, leading to office space on the second floor. On more than one occasion, I would hear what sounded like one of the doors closing at the top of the stairs, and then what sounded like heavy feet coming down the metal stairs about halfway. At first it freaked me out, but I didn't find anyone. Eventually I just got used to it and paid it no attention. Every morning I would sit at the front desk and greet people coming in. A few people would stop, and we would talk about a game that was played early that week or something in the news. There was always this one lady that would come in every day. We would say good morning, but usually nothing more. Then, one day out of the blue, she stopped. She asked, "Have you ever heard any ghosts here?" I told her the story about the door at the top of one of the staircases and the footsteps that usually seemed to go down the hallway and then stop. She replied, "Oh yeah, that's Jack. He had a heart attack about 10 years ago and died in his office." The thing that freaked me out the most is, why did it take her so long to stop and ask when I must have greeted her about 500 times before? I used to work private security. We used to have one job site that was an abandoned hospital. It was a new hospital that apparently botched too many operations and was sued into bankruptcy. Only one time did I have to watch it at night. We were required to walk the halls once an hour to make sure nothing was out of place. Very few windows on the inside of the hospital. It was incredibly unsettling walking around completely pitch black hallways with only a flashlight. I think it was way worse than everything was pristine. Everything was in place as if it was opening for business the next day. The worst part was walking by the operating room. There were big windows into the rooms and stainless steel operating tables. It was pretty horrifying. This part is going to sound unbelievable, but I'm pretty sure the building wasn't completely level. There was one area where the wheelchairs were lined up, and every now and then one of the chairs would be like 2 feet out of line with the others. I could think about it reasonably, but when it's completely black except for the small circle your flashlight makes, it's still really unsettling.